Alright, hello citizens of the Nigelverse. It's Nige here once again. So, 5 years ago today, we were graced with the return of Spyro the Dragon in the Spyro Reignited Trilogy. So, how do I feel about it 5 years after it came out? We'll talk about that obviously, but first, let me take you back to 2018. And actually, you know what? Let's go back even further because we have to go back even further. We have to go back to 2017 actually. So in 2017, we were gifted with the Crash Bandicoot n-sane Trilogy, a remaster slash remake of the original Crash trilogy, that being Crash Bandicoot, Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back, and Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped. And it was a lot of fun for a lot of people. I didn't play it at the time because I didn't have my PS4 yet, but a lot of people obviously enjoyed it. But then the question came up, when's it Spyro's turn? I've mentioned before on the channel how Spyro and Crash have almost an intertwined destiny. A lot of similarities between both Crash and Spyro. They both started off as kind of mascots for the PlayStation, including their respective studios being kind of friends slash like cubicle mates. Of course, Crash was developed by Naughty Dog Games, and Spyro was developed by Insomniac Studios. However, eventually Crash and Spyro were traded off to different company. He's Spyro. The only difference between that is Crash was ripped away from Naughty Dog. Meanwhile, Insomniac kind of gave up the Spyro license. Insomniac ultimately gave up the Spyro license due to not really having anything else for him because he's not bipedal. So they felt like they were kind of out of ideas in that regard. So they transitioned into someone who was bipedal, that being Ratchet, which is how we got the Ratchet and Clank games. Meanwhile, Naughty Dog would go on to make Jak and Daxter, and Naughty Dog and Insomniac are still going to this day. Of course, Insomniac continuing to make the Ratchet and Clank games. The most recent one being Rift Apart from, I believe, 2021 is when it came out, and then obviously they're working on the Spider-Man universe, as well as the Wolverine game coming out. Meanwhile, Naughty Dog went on to make Jak and Daxter, or sadly that kind of fell through too. But then went on to make games like Uncharted and The Last of Us, of course. Both studios still very active, and trying to see when the Rift Apart came out. I believe it was 2021, that's a PC release. Yep, 2021 is when that came out, and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is on PC. But anyway, back to Crash and Spyro. So they were traded off to different studios. And don't worry, we're gonna bring it back to Spyro, but just follow me along on the tangent here. But they were traded off to different studios where their first outings on the PlayStation didn't go so well. That being the PlayStation 2 didn't really go so well. Crash Bandicoot had The Wrath of Cortex X, and Spyro had Enter the Dragonfly. Both kind of stinkers. Although between the two, who surprisingly it's Wrath of Cortex that's looked on a bit more fondly. Like it was butt huggy, but it was like a glitchy mess. But a lot of people do still kind of prefer it to Enter the Dragonfly, which I haven't played Wrath of Cortex, so I can't fully co-sign. But yeah, but there was that. Had both suffered from rushed development, and both were objectively like bad games. And then they kind of tried to steer the ship in the right direction. Spyro had A Hero's Tale, and Crash had Twinsanity. Sadly, Twinsanity also was rushed and had a lot of like cut content and stuff. But at least he's in a lot of people's eyes, it was still much better than Wrath of Cortex. And it was actually Twinsanity that was my first Crash Bandicoot game that I played. Meanwhile, Spyro had A Hero's Tale, which A Hero's Tale was alright. Hey, maybe it's the nostalgia talking, but I think it missed the mark on quite a bit of stuff, but I don't remember it being as bad as people say. I think a lot of that does come from like still feeling very sore after Enter the Dragonfly and what went down there. But yeah, so there was that. Some mobile games, including some GBA and some DS games, including that crossover. Between Crash and Spyro, that being Crash Purple, Ripto's Rampage, and Spyro Orange, the Cortex Conspiracy, which turned out to be bad. How did you mess that up? Two people that had, or two characters that a lot of people have been wanting like a crossover between for some time. How did you mess that up? Why did you mess that up? But after that, they tried totally different directions for both characters. Crash went on to have the Titans games, that being Crash of the Titans and Mind Over Mutant. And meanwhile, Spyro went into the Legend of Spyro trilogy, that being the Legend of Spyro: A New Beginning, then Legend of Spyro: Eternal Night, and then Dawn of the Dragon. And so the Legend of Spyro actually got an extra game as opposed to Crash. And then they stayed dormant, kinda, because Spyro then was roped into Skylanders, which I had Skylanders growing up, so I guess I'm just as guilty of that. But even that, Spyro mainly used pretty much to sell Skylanders, like, hey, here's this familiar character, Spyro the Dragon, here help you sell a game. And Cinder, of course, from the Legend of Spyro trilogy, was also shoehorned into there to help push the game, like, hey, these characters, you know these characters, right? And wouldn't you know, good old Crash found himself in Skylanders Imaginators, I believe it was the game he was in, and he was on the TV show where he talked. Yes, he heard me right. He talked. Yes, Crash Bandicoot. Yeah, yes. Pick your jaw up the floor. It's okay. A Crash Bandicoot, the character that's been hasn't really had dialogue, mostly like grunts and noises and stuff, have actually had full-on sentences in the Skylanders TV show. So that was a thing. At least he had an Australian accent, which makes sense. But that was it for a while. But then in 2017, now we bring it back to 2017, we got the n-sane Trilogy, which I did, of course, end up playing, and did have quite a bit of fun with the n-sane Trilogy. But when that came out, the question people were asking was, when's it Spyro's turn? Which is what I was very much excited for. Of course, nothing against the beloved orange marsupial. The n-sane Trilogy was really fun. Like, I was a fan of Crash Bandicoot after playing Twin Sandy. I became even more of a fan of him after playing the n-sane Trilogy, and of course Crash 4. But we'll get to that obviously. But people were wondering, when's it Spyro's turn? And the answer, 2018. We got the Spyro Reignited Trilogy. Both kind of 20-year anniversaries for their respective games. But we got the Spyro Reignited Trilogy. It was announced. I forgot where I first heard about it. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and I believe my brother Tony sent me some info about it, announcing the Spyro Reignited Trilogy. And you know what? I was excited. I was hyped. I didn't have my PS4 yet at the time, but I definitely wanted to get it just for that game. That and Spider-Man, which was coming out as well. Oh, and man, 2018 was a really solid year for video games, between Spider-Man, Spyro, and like God of War. 2018 was, I remember 2018 was a pretty good year for video games all told. But nevertheless, as it was originally scheduled for September 28th, if I'm not mistaken, but it eventually got pushed back to November 13th. Thankfully that gave me some extra time. I believe I got my PS4 around August of 2018, so I had plenty of time to get my PS4 and pre-order Spyro Reignited Trilogy. Yes, this was actually the first game I ever pre-ordered in my entire life. I pre-ordered a couple games afterwards, or it's to mixed results. But yeah, I pre-ordered this game because I wanted it. I definitely wanted it. Like, I was so excited. I was counting down the days as to when it would finally come out and I'd be able to play it. And alas, the day finally came, and I was in college at the time. But I remember I woke up early on this day because it was like installing on my PS4. So I woke up early this day just to play it, just to get my hands on it, to experience the Reignited Trilogy, because the Spyro Trilogy, which is why I have such a fondness for Spyro the Dragon in the first place, as opposed to Crash. Of course, again, nothing against Crash Bandicoot. Crash Bandicoot's still a whole lot of fun, and it's awesome to see him back in the limelight, which, again, we'll get to. But this is what I was really excited for. Was the Spyro Reignited Trilogy. Growing up playing the original Spyro games, having replayed them earlier in 2018 on the PS3 through emulation, I was ready. I was a little nervous because I know with them being faithful to the source material, and all that stuff, the fact that, of course, the original version of Spyro 3, a lot of the tracks were reused, which the only reason I found that out was after playing it on the PS3 through emulation. They emulated the PAL version, aka the version with a lot of the repeated tracks, instead of the greatest hits version, which is what I grew up with, which had all the different tracks. So to see them having in the greatest hits tracks on the Reignited Trilogy, was a sigh of relief. But yeah, so the day came, and booting it up for the first time, I had seen some trailers. I try my best to avoid trailers and everything, and because I want to go into it completely fresh, completely blind and everything. Obviously, trailers and stuff are meant to hype up the game. I get that, but I try my best to avoid them whenever possible, just to go in as completely blind as possible, so I can really experience the game. And man, when I booted it up for the first time, and I saw and I had seen some stuff with it, like seeing like a lot of the graphics and stuff for the game, seeing a lot of the movements and stuff for the game, and how they replicated it from the original, but to see it in person for the first time on my PS4, or booting up Spyro 1 and I do like that you're able to play any of the games in the trilogy in any order you want to. If you want to start with Spyro 1, you can. If you want to start with Spyro 2, you can. And if you want to start with Spyro 3, you can. But I decided I'd play them in order, obviously. But seeing it all remastered, all scaled up, which was the marketing, seeing just how beautiful it looked, and how well of a job Toys for Bob did with the game, just from a graphic standpoint. Oh, it was so beautiful. Now I know the issue with the disc only having Spyro 1, and then you had to download Spyro 2 and 3. But I bought the game digital, so it didn't really affect me, but that is something worth mentioning. But being able to play it around, even as brief as I was able to, early in that morning, mostly because I really wanted to experience the game, at least, even if just for a moment before I went off to school, went off to college, and then obviously I'd play when I got home, but even just seeing that for a brief moment, the memories, the nostalgia, all that good stuff that just came flooding back. Like, man, it was phenomenal. It was definitely phenomenal. And seeing what they did with the whole trilogy, and how the tracks were remixed. Every track was remixed, but you did have the option to switch between the reignited tracks and the original songs. But I honestly liked both. Like, Stuart Copeland redid, Stuart Copeland, of course, the drummer for The Police, he's did the original soundtrack for the Spyro the Dragon games, and then also came back to do the reignited tracks for the games. games, and to see those and to see the environment and it's looking absolutely beautiful, such attention to detail where it looks somewhat realistic but also very cartoony and also very colorful and vibrant. It was phenomenal. It was so phenomenal, and it was such a it was such an incredible experience. Getting to play, I played through the whole trilogy. I 100%ed all the games and platinumed them as well. Hell, and which I had 100% of the games when I emulated them on PS3. Sadly, back in the day when I was playing it growing up, I didn't 100% because I kind of sucked at video games. But I 100% it then, and I went back to 100% it on platinum it on in the Reignited Trilogy, both on my PlayStation 4 and my Nintendo Switch. Yes, when they ported it to Nintendo Switch, I got it there too, so I could play it on the go. But just as an absolute fun time. Granted, it not really Game of the Year material, mostly because it is kind of is essentially a remaster of the original games. But you know what? I didn't care because I was so happy to have it. Was it perfect? No. There's some things they could have did differently. And some stuff that they could have either kept the same or retooled a little bit to make it better than the originals. Yes, but it was still awesome to have, and it was still awesome to play. And being able to play it not just on my PS3 playing the originals, but then playing it reignited, it was really fantastic. And of course, there's even on like Switch, even though it's graphically inferior, or it doesn't quite have all the bells and whistles that the bigger console ports like the PlayStation and Xbox have. It was still a really awesome experience, like getting to re-meet the characters, having all of the lines redubbed by the actors. Even though the Electrolls in Hurricos and Spyro 2 no longer sound like SpongeBob, seeing all the voice actors, including Tom Kenny, seeing all like the work, just all the work and everything, just everything put in to the Reignited Trilogy to make it just like the originals, and to really give it that fresh coat of paint and the time and dedication, and even if it was delayed with good reason. Just all of it just was so phenomenal. It's a game I've beaten multiple times. It's a game I've played multiple times. And technically games because it is a trilogy, but I played them multiple times. I even played them on stream, which I haven't streamed in a while. But nevertheless, follow me on Twitch anyway at the n-diddy. That's THW_n-diddy. It's also in the description in the link tree. But yeah, so experiencing that was awesome the first time around. It's still awesome even 5 years later. 5 years later, I still find myself finding pretty much excuses to go back and play the games again. Heck, after I shut off this camera and finish the video, I might just boot it up on my PlayStation and play it again. Probably not the whole thing, but even just pieces of it. It pretty much giving me my childhood back, and for people who didn't play the originals, now having a way to play it on like modern consoles, is awesome, and it's awesome to see. And I've talked before about the potential future of Spyro, or at this point, kind of lack thereof. But you know what? I'm still holding out hope. If Crash can come back, Spyro can as well. Spyro kind of is in a role where he's still present, but mostly, supporting as like a support character for Crash, such as Spyro and like his villains and stuff. And I think a couple of his friends come in, like Crash Team Rumble, or them being like playable racers in Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. And for the Spyro social media to still be active is really awesome to see. And I just want to say thank you to the Reignited Trilogy for giving me my childhood back. And of course, Toys for Bob also doing a fantastic job with Crash, really bringing Crash back into the forefront with Crash 4 and Crash Team Racing. Crash Team Racing Nitro Fuel, that should be, and Crash Team Rumble, bringing Crash back into the forefront. Here's to hoping they can do the same for Spyro. But you know what? Even if they don't, I'm still happy to have the Reignited Trilogy and being able to re-experience my childhood and being able to play it pretty much whenever I want, going back into my childhood whenever I want. If you haven't played Spyro, you have the opportunity to do so through the Reignited Trilogy. But if you want to play it again, I definitely recommend the Reignited Trilogy. It doesn't really change much from the original games, but you know what? It doesn't really need to. Just having that faithful adaptation, and you can tell they put a lot of love and care into it. Again, it's not perfect. There are some things I wish they would did differently, or some things I wish would have carried over from the originals that they didn't really do. But you know what? It's still really awesome. So 5 years later, Spyro Reignited Trilogy still is awesome. And I am excited to see and interested to see what the future may or may not hold for our favorite purple dragon, and I kind of talked a little bit about it when I talked about will there be a Spyro 4 when I did that discussion, but I am interested to see, like I would love to see a new game, and I would love to, and honestly, I know this might sound scary, but stay with me here. I would love for them to do another Crash crossover with Crash. Actually, I think the main problem with like the crossover that they did for the Game Boy was that it was really weird. Like, I obviously I missed out on that era because I didn't have a Game Boy growing up, but it seemed like the gameplay and stuff and it being not great, it was really weird. Like have a crossover, have some Crash, have the best of like Crash levels. Well, some stuff that makes Crash levels great. Have some stuff that makes Spyro levels great. Have Crash in some Spyro levels. Have Spyro in some Crash levels. Granted, they're not really. They're similar, but not quite the same. And they're both obviously platformers, but Spyro is a lot more about exploration. Meanwhile, Crash is a lot more hardcore platforming. And although Crash has delved into the open world with games such as like Twin Sandy and the Titans games, but yeah, I'm interested to see what the future holds for Spyro the Dragon. But the Reignited Trilogy 5 years later, still really awesome, and I might play it later on. In fact, I'm probably gonna play it later on. But yeah, if you haven't already, go pick up a copy. They have it for PlayStation, they have it for Xbox, and they have it for Switch. Definitely go pick it up and play it today, like right now. That is, obviously you're able to. But nevertheless, that is going to do it for this discussion video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed pretty much me ranting and raving about Spyro the Dragon for almost 25 minutes. But of course, it is the 5th anniversary of the Reignited Trilogy, and the 30th anniversary, it was the 25th anniversary not too long ago. I covered it on System Shock Radio. How could I forget? But thank you for allowing me to gush about Spyro the Dragon for about almost 25 minutes. But I love, if you can't tell, I love Spyro the Dragon so much. It's probably my favorite game ever because it's so fun, so colorful, and the music is fantastic, and it's just a lot of fun. And the Reignited Trilogy captured that perfectly, and it still holds up 5 years later. It doesn't really break too much ground, but it's not supposed to. It was pretty much it's pretty much like the n-sane trilogy, where the n-sane trilogy pretty much was also fairly faithful to the original. To the point where even Pinstripe Pottero got to keep his gun, but the Norix and Twilight Harbor and Spyro 1 didn't get to keep theirs. There's priorities, I guess, but nevertheless. I promise I'm done now. I promise. But thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do me a favor: like, comment, subscribe. share with your friends, turn on post notifications so you know every time I upload a video so you can see as soon as it drops. Let me know in the comments below your thoughts on Spyro, the Reignited Trilogy, and what do you think the future holds for Spyro the Dragon? Do you want him to have a future, or do you want them to just leave it here? Like, if they left it at just the Reignited Trilogy, I think people would be some people would be disappointed, but I think some people will be fine because the Reignited Trilogy is a great note to end off on. But if they're able to do it for Crash and really extend that IP, then hopefully they can do the same for Spyro. But thank you all so much for watching. I will see you guys later. Peace.